finished added all my shadows now, and I know what you're thinking, that looks really messy, and you're right, like this it does, but bear with me, it is going to look great when we add our bricks over the top. Now what I've decided to do to make my brickwork look a little bit more Christmassy, because this is a Christmas card, I wanted to add a little bit of shimmer to my bricks. So I don't know if you can see on here that I've added some gold embossing powder just here and there over the brickwork, again to add some texture and a little bit of shine, just makes it a little more Christmassy. And I'm going to show you how I did that. But first, you may notice on my card, I've also gone ahead and I've gold embossed a little star on top of my tree. And then on my leaves and my branches, I've embossed some little, looks like little baubles and decorations. And those stamps were in the Beauty and Joy stamp set also, which is the one we're using. Here's the little star I embossed. And then here are the little, looks like berries, I guess, that I used as baubles on my tree. So I've gone ahead and done that. So let me show you how I added a little bit of embossing powder to my brickwork. I'll just set that aside. So we're going to be doing this smaller piece. I've already done the others. So you're going to take your Versamark ink pad and a sponge, and you're just going to add a little bit of ink onto your sponge, and very lightly you're just going to tap this onto your bricks, just lightly, like that. And then you're going to take your gold embossing powder and you're just going to pop that in the embossing powder like that and give it a flick to get off any excess. Now we want to be careful that we don't use too much embossing powder because we don't want to cover all that lovely inking that we went to the trouble of doing. So just flick off as much as you can, and then you're going to take a small paintbrush and just take the embossing powder out of the mortar joints, because we don't want it to be covering up the mortar that we created earlier. So just go through and just wipe it out of there like that. And then I just take my finger and I just wipe off the excess embossing powder. Okay, now that's ready for heat setting, and I'll be right back. I've finished heat setting my embossing powder now, and I'm wondering if you can see that detail that's in there now. It just gives that little bit of shimmer, and it also gives a little bit of extra texture to that brickwork, and it's going to make our card look that little bit more Christmassy. Okay, the next thing we need to do is actually cut a mat for this background to sit on. So I've taken a piece of cherry cobbler coloured cardstock, and I've cut the A4 piece in half. And then I've taken one of the halves and I've just trimmed 1/2 centimetre off the top and 1/2 centimetre off one side for our mat. Now the other thing I wanted to do was add a little bit of shimmer, being Christmassy, behind this die cut. So we have the nice red shining through, but I wanted a little bit of shimmer. And so what I decided to do is use a Wink of Stella glitter brush pen. So if you look at my cardstock, and again, oh yes, I hope you can see that, I've taken my brush, and what I've done to get the placement is I've just lined up my background on my mat. I've taken my Wink of Stella and I've just marked each of the little outlines in the leaves just roughly like that. Then I've removed it, and then I've just taken my pen and I've just really just scribbled over all that area to add that shimmer. So that sits behind that die cut and again gives us a little more shimmer. So you can see that that will peek through our die cut. So we're now up to gluing our background onto our cherry cobbler. I'll just move this out of the way, and I'm going to use our multi-purpose glue for this. So all I'm going to do is just carefully add my glue in and around these little parts of the die cut. You don't want to add too much glue because it's going to squirt out and cover up all that lovely shimmer we've just added. So just add a little bit and go right around the edge and stick that down. Well, I have my background stuck now to my cherry cobbler mat, and as you can see, we've got a little bit of shimmer. I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up, but there is a little bit of shimmer going on in that background, which is really nice. And I also forgot to mention as well, when I was preparing my cherry cobbler mat, that I ran the edges through my Versamark embossing pad, and then I added some gold embossing powder and heat set that as well. So I've got a nice gold edge to my mat. So the next thing we need to do is prepare a few elements to continue on with our card. Now remember that piece of scrap cardstock, Whisper White cardstock we had left after we cut it off for that piece that we embossed our bricks with? We're now going to use that to cut a few elements. And the first thing you're going to want to cut is a label for our sentiment. And I have used a punch for that. This is the Pretty Label punch that I've used, and you'll need to cut one of those, which I have done at the top there. I've also stamped the urn that's in the Beauty and Joy stamp set, this one here, the one we actually already stamped in the background. I stamped that in crumb cake ink, and then I fussy cut that out. So there it is there. And I've also added in here a little bit of shading, like the exact same thing we did behind the brickwork. I've added a little bit of shading in here, and I've also added a little bit of gold embossing powder just to the edges here, just to give that a little bit of a highlight and to blend it in. And that's going to be stuck over the top of the one we previously stamped, but has the shadow behind it, and you can see how that now makes that urn pop up with all that lovely shadowing behind. So that's our urn. I'm also going to need to cut another one of these lovely sprays that's out of our Christmas layers dies. So we're going to cut another one of those out of that same piece. And then there's another little die that's a littler version of that. And I've cut 4 of those out of here also. And we're actually going to colour those. And I'm going to show you how I did that. But first of all, here's the label that I have previously cut out. And all I did with that is do a background exactly the same as we did on our background here. So I used the crumb cake on the silicone mat. Then I dabbed a little bit of the cherry cobbler ink with a sponge, and then I did some cherry cobbler splatters, and then I stamped my sentiment, which again is out of the Beauty and Joy stamp set, this one here. I stamped that in Early Espresso. Now again, the same as the background, I sponged some crumb cake first of all around the edge, then a little bit of Early Espresso, and then I've run the edge of my punched piece through the Versamark ink pad and added some gold embossing powder and heat set that, so I've got a nice gold edge to my sentiment also. And that's how I created that. Now with those, I'll show you the 4 little pieces that I have actually cut out and already coloured, just to show you. So that's what they look like, those 4 little pieces. And I've coloured those using our Stampin' Blends markers. I found that to be easiest. So I've taken, I have dark cherry cobbler, and I also have dark mossy meadow that we'll be using to colour. Now the piece that we originally cut out of here, I have already gone ahead and coloured completely in the dark mossy meadow, because we're going to be adding some little rhinestones to these just to make it a little bit more dimensional. But this piece I'm actually going to be using behind the brickwork and as a little bit of background. So we're going to colour these little berries with our marker. So I'll show you how I did that. So I'll move this out of the way. Just bring in some scrap paper. So I started by colouring my berries first, which is really easy. So just like that. It's really quick and easy. So see, just coloured those berries. And then I took my Mossy Meadow and I've just coloured in the rest. Just bringing that up to those berries. Just making sure I'm covering all those white bits. Now if you wanted to, you could cut this out of Mossy Meadow cardstock and add rhinestones where I've coloured in the red. That would obviously save time to cut it out of the cardstock, but sometimes we don't always have the coloured cardstock on hand, and since I had this white cardstock left over, it made sense to me to use it. So that's why I'm colouring it. So this is a way you can still have matching embellishments and not necessarily have the coloured cardstock. If you've got your Stampin' Blends, you can colour it yourself. And that's all we do to the whole piece. I just coloured the berries first and then went over the green part with my dark Mossy Meadow. I've finished colouring my foliage now, and as you can see, it looks nice and bright using our Stampin' Blends. Now it's just a matter of auditioning our pieces behind our brickwork and seeing where you would like it. So what you do is you just take your bricks and lay it there and just tuck this underneath and just fiddle around with it until you're happy with where you think it might look good. So my second piece of bricks comes over here. I might put a piece up in this corner like that. And I think I'd like a piece just coming out of this bit of brick here. And this one I might like coming down, and maybe I might make that a little bit longer with this other one. But you can place them wherever you like and whatever looks nice, as long as you just sort of tuck them a little bit behind the brickwork, and then you just glue them in place. And then we're going to come back and glue our bricks over the top. And while we have our glue out, we're also going to be able to glue our urn over the top of our shading. The easiest way to glue your foliage down is to decide where you'd like it. So I'm thinking that's where I'm going to pop this piece, about here. Take my brickwork away, and what you can do is just glue a little bit of it down. And that will sort of hold it in place for you to glue the rest down. So I'll just glue that branch down like that. And then you can come back and just lift this up a little bit at a time and glue it that way. Well, I've stuck down, as you can see, all my foliage now, and I've stuck all my bricks down as well over the top. The other thing I've done is I've taken a A4 piece of thick Whisper White cardstock. I've scored it in half and folded it, and that is my card base, and I've glued my mat onto my card base. So as you can see, those shadow areas really come into play now, especially around the urn. You can really see that those bricks in the urn are sort of popping out, so it's a little bit more dimensional. So the next thing we want to do is just add a few little berries, which we're going to use as rhinestones. We're going to add them to our tree and to our berries. So I've just laid my sentiment on top where I think I'm going to like it to be. And I've kind of just done a rough estimate of how many I'm going to need. I've just counted them. Now what I'm going to do is take our rhinestones, which are here. You can see I've used quite a lot of them already. And we're just going to take the dark cherry cobbler And we can colour these ourselves to custom match our project, which is really nice. So what you do, you just take the blends and you just colour over the top like that. And it dries, being an alcohol marker, it dries straight away, so you can use these embellishments as soon as you colour them in. Just like that. And once you've got some coloured, then it's just a matter of taking them off the sheet and popping them where those round circles are, like that, just to add a little bit more dimension. So we're going to add those to our berries and add them to our tree. So I've added some rhinestones now to the green foliage that's sitting on top of the brickwork, and I've also added some to my Christmas tree as well, just to add for decoration. The other thing I've done is taken my Wink of Stella brush glitter pen, and I've actually added a little bit of glitter to all the little coloured in berries that are sitting in the background, just to give them a little bit of shimmer as well. And all that's left to do now is to add our sentiment, and we're done. So I've just put some dimensionals on the back of my sentiment. Let's peel that off, and I'm just going to place it where I think it looks nice. About there. And there is our card all finished. We've got a little bit of glimmer happening there, lots of texture in our card, and using some traditional colours.